Night settled over the city, like a heavy blanket of glass and neon. Inside a small apartment on the fourth floor of an aging brick building, Naomi Calder sat surrounded by the quiet hum of machines. The room glowed in soft shades of blue and white from half a dozen monitors arranged across her desk. Hard drives blinked steadily from a metal rack against the wall. Thousands of fragments of the internet slept inside them. Old news articles, forgotten message boards, archived videos, entire corners of digital history preserved before they could vanish into the endless churn of the web. Naomi leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. Another long night cataloging internet oddities. Tonight's curiosity sat on the center monitor. A photograph of a tall metallic object standing in the red desert of Utah. A monolith. It had appeared seemingly overnight, discovered by wildlife officials flying a helicopter survey through a remote canyon. Within hours, the image had spread across the internet like wildfire. No markings, no explanation. Just a smooth, reflective pillar rising from the earth like something planted by the universe itself. Naomi tapped a few keys. Her archive software began copying the entire web page into offline storage. Headline: Mysterious metal monolith discovered in Utah desert. She archived the images, the article, the comments, the forum threads already forming beneath it. Another strange little mystery saved for posterity. She stretched, reaching for her mug of cold coffee. Internet's gonna have fun with this one, she muttered. Aliens, art installation, government experiment. Theories were already multiplying by the minute. Naomi finished the archive and stored it in her offline database. Then she moved on. 2 days later, Naomi reopened the file. She wasn't planning to revisit the monolith story, she simply needed an example archive for a database test. But the moment the page appeared on her screen, something felt wrong. Naomi leaned closer. Her eyes scanned the article slowly. The headline was the same, the photographs were the same, but one detail had changed. In the original article, the monolith had been described as 10 feet tall. Now the article said 12 feet. Naomi frowned. That's strange. She opened the metadata. Same timestamp, same publication date, no edit history. The article had never been updated. Maybe she had remembered it wrong. That happened all the time. Still, archivists live by a simple rule. Trust the record. Naomi opened the offline backup she had stored 2 days earlier. The archive copy loaded instantly. She placed the two articles side by side and froze. The archived version clearly read 10 feet tall. The live version said 12. Naomi's brow furrowed. That shouldn't be possible. Her backup was an exact copy of the page at the moment it was captured. Meaning one of two things had happened. Either the website had secretly edited the article without recording the change, or Naomi slowly leaned back in her chair, or the archive had captured something that no longer existed. She stared at the screens, then quietly whispered the thought forming in her mind. That's not how it used to be. Outside her window, the city continued its restless rhythm of headlights and distant traffic. Unaware that somewhere in the Utah desert, a silent metal monolith stood under the stars. And something about reality had just been adjusted. Morning sunlight spilled across the tiled rooftops of Seville, tonally old city gold. Inside a former monastery on a narrow cobblestone street, the past and the future shared the same walls. The thick stone corridors had once echoed with the footsteps of monks.
Now they carry the steady whisper of cooling fans and server racks. In a dimly lit archive room, Elias Navarro sat alone at a long wooden desk worn smooth by centuries of use. His laptop glowed softly in the quiet. Rows of black server towers lined the far wall, their indicator lights blinking like patient stars. Elias preferred working early. The building was quiet then still. History felt easier to hear in silence. He sipped from a small porcelain cup of espresso while scrolling through a set of archived historical databases. Today's task was routine maintenance, the chronology mirror. Every few weeks, the system captured compressed snapshots of thousands of historical records. Government archives, news databases, scientific publications, digital libraries. A frozen moment of human knowledge. A safeguard against corruption or manipulation. Elias reviewed the comparison report. The mirror had flagged a discrepancy. One record differed from its stored version. That happened occasionally. Usually it meant a typo correction or a new update added to a historical article. Still, Elias preferred to verify every anomaly himself. He opened the flagged entry, a historical record from a major international news archive. The article described a famous political speech from decades ago. Elias read it once. Then again, something about the wording felt unfamiliar. He pulled up the chronology mirror version stored on an offline drive. The original loaded beside the live database entry. Elias leaned forward slightly. Both records had the same timestamp, same source, same date, but the speech quote was different. Just a few words, subtle. The sort of change most readers would never notice, but historians noticed everything. Elias checked the edit logs. There were none. No revisions, no updates. The article had supposedly remained unchanged for years, yet the words were different. Elias tapped a few keys, running a broader scan across the database. More discrepancies appeared. A historical date shifted slightly. A statistic altered by a small percentage. A photocal records placed by a slightly different version of the same image. Tiny changes. Barely noticeable, but widespread. Elias frowned thoughtfully. This wasn't corruption. Corruption was messy. This was precise. He opened another dataset, then another. The pattern began forming. Elias turned his chair slowly toward the server rack behind him. For a moment, he simply listened to the quiet hum of machines. His reflection stared back from the dark screen of a powered-down monitor. Interesting, he murmured. He began typing commands quickly now, cross-referencing the timestamps of each discrepancy. The system compiled the results. A timeline appeared across his screen, clusters of anomalies, each cluster occurring within hours of one another. Elias stared at the dates. His brow tightened. The clusters aligned with something else, something he had seen in the news. He opened a browser window and searched a list of recent global headlines. The results appeared instantly. Photographs of strange metallic pillars standing in deserts, forests, and empty fields. Monoliths. Utah, Romania, California. Each appearance had ignited waves of speculation across the internet. Those people believed they were art installations or elaborate pranks. Elias slowly overlaid the two timelines. The anomaly clusters. The monolith appearances. The correlation was nearly perfect every time one of the monoliths appeared. Historical records shifted slightly. Elias leaned back in his chair. For several long seconds he said nothing. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small black notebook. Inside were handwritten notes, observations, oddities he had noticed over the years. On the last page he had written a question several months earlier. Why do some historical details feel wrong? Below it was a list of familiar curiosities, brand names spelled differently, movie lines remembered incorrectly, historical events that seemed slightly out of place, things the internet had jokingly labeled the Mandela effect. Elias picked up his pen. Beneath the list he wrote one new sentence. The anomalies coincide with the monolith appearances. He closed the notebook slowly, then turned back to the screen. Somewhere in the world, he realized, someone else had to be noticing this too. Someone who preserved the past the way he did. Someone who might already be searching for the same answer. Elias opened a quiet corner of the internet. An obscure archival research forum used mostly by digital historians and preservation specialists.
He began typing a short message. A careful message, one that would sound harmless to most readers, but unmistakable to the right person. He paused before pressing send, then added one final line. Has anyone else noticed that archived records appear to be changing? Across the Atlantic Ocean, in a small apartment filled with humming hard drives, Naomi Calder's computer chimed softly. A new message had arrived.
Night had returned to Naomi Calder's apartment. Outside, rain whispered against the windows, streaking the glass with silver lines that blurred the city lights beyond. Inside, the servers hummed steadily in the corner, like patient mechanical insects. Naomi sat cross-legged in her chair, studying the two versions of the Utah monolith article still glowing on her screens. 10 feet, 12 feet. The difference was small, but impossible. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Archivists were trained to doubt their memories before doubting their records. Yet her offline archive was exact. It could not change unless she changed it. Which meant reality had, or something had edited the past the way a programmer edits code. The idea felt absurd. Naomi rubbed her temples. "You've been staring at this too long," she murmured to herself. Then her computer chimed, a soft notification tone. New message. Naomi glanced at the corner of the screen. It came from an old archival research forum she rarely visited anymore, a quiet place where historians and data preservation specialists occasionally exchanged obscure technical notes. The subject line read, "Archive integrity question." Naomi opened it. The message was short, very short. Has anyone else noticed that archived records appear to be changing? Naomi froze. She leaned closer to the screen. The message had been posted only minutes ago. Author Navarro. Her eyes scanned the thread again. Most people reading it would assume the writer was referring to database corruption or editing errors. But Naomi recognized the careful wording immediately. Someone else had seen it. Someone else had compared archived records against their originals. Someone else had discovered the same impossible discrepancy. Her heart began beating a little faster. Naomi clicked the user profile. Location: Spain. Occupation: digital preservation engineer. She sat back slowly. Across the Atlantic Ocean, someone she had never met was asking the exact question she had been whispering to herself all night. Naomi cracked her knuckles and began typing. Her reply was just as cautious. Archivists understood subtle language. You never said the strange thing outright. You let the other expert recognize it. Her message appeared beneath his. I've observed discrepancies between live web pages and offline archive captures. Metadata indicates no recorded edits. Have you verified your backups against air-gap storage? She hesitated, then added a final line. My anomalies began shortly after the Utah monolith event. Naomi hit send. The forum page refreshed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then her inbox chimed again. The reply came faster this time. She opened it. The message contained only 2 sentences. Yes, my backups confirm the discrepancies, and my anomalies correspond with every known monolith appearance. Naomi's breath caught. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Her eyes drifted toward the world map pinned to the wall beside her desk. Colored pins marked each monolith location she had been tracking. Utah, Romania, California. Each one placed carefully as the news reports appeared. Now she imagined invisible lines stretching between them, connecting them. Somewhere deep in her mind, the shape of a pattern began forming. A geometry too large to see from the ground. She typed again, this time abandoning some of the caution. If the monoliths are triggering these changes, she paused. Even writing the thought felt surreal. Then she finished the sentence. What exactly are they changing? The reply arrived almost instantly, as if the man in Spain had been waiting for her to ask. Naomi opened the message. Inside was a single attachment, a compressed archive file. She downloaded it and opened the contents. 7 documents appeared, each labeled with a year. Naomi opened the first file. Her eyes widened slowly. The document contained a historical timeline of major world events. She opened the next file and the next. Each timeline looked almost identical. But not quite. Small differences appeared everywhere, different dates, different names, different outcomes. 7 nearly identical histories of Earth. 7 versions of reality. Naomi whispered softly to the empty room. Those aren't database errors. Another message appeared from Elias Navarro. These are the versions preserved by my chronology mirror. 7 converging historical records, all verified against offline storage. Naomi stared at the files. 7 histories, 7 realities. Then the final message arrived. Just one line. I believe the monoliths are correcting the timeline. The servers hummed quietly around her. Naomi slowly leaned back in her chair. If he was right, then somewhere on Earth, something had the ability to rewrite history itself, and it was doing it one correction at a time.
The rain had stopped outside Naomi's apartment, leaving the city wrapped in the glossy quiet that follows a storm. Inside, every screen in the room glowed. Naomi had not slept. 7 versions of human history still filled her monitors, each slightly different from the others, like reflections in warped mirrors. Across the Atlantic, Elias Navarro sat in his office in Seville, the morning sun creeping slowly across the ancient stone walls of the archive building. Their video call window sat in the corner of Naomi's screen. The connection crackled slightly with distance, but Elias's calm voice carried clearly. Your archives confirm the same discrepancies. Naomi nodded. Every one of them, my offline copies, match your earlier versions exactly. She gestured toward the screen filled with timelines. That means the changes didn't happen in databases. Elias finished the thought quietly. They happened to reality. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elias leaned toward his keyboard. I have been running a monitoring script since our conversation began, he said. What does it monitor? Naomi asked. Live updates across several historical databases and news archives. If another anomaly occurs, it will flag it instantly. Naomi rubbed her eyes. So we wait for another monolith? Yes. The word hum in the air between them. Naomi glanced toward the world map on her wall again. Colored pins marked every known monolith appearance. 7 pins. 7 timeline variations. Her stomach tightened. What if they appear randomly, she asked. Elias shook his head. They do not appear randomly. He turned his screen toward the camera. A map appeared. Lines connected the monolith locations in a complex geometric network stretching across the globe. The shape looked almost organic, like a circuit or a lock mechanism. The pattern suggests a system activating piece by piece, Elias said. Then when the next one activates? Naomi asked. Before Elias could answer, both of their computers chimed at the same time. A sharp alert tone. Elias turned immediately to his monitoring dashboard. Naomi opened a news feed. The headline appeared across multiple websites simultaneously. Strange metal monolith discovered in Turkish mountain region. Naomi's post jumped. That's new, she said. Elias was already typing. Yes, he said quietly. It appeared less than 20 minutes ago. Naomi opened the article and quickly archived the page into her offline storage. The photograph filled her screen, another tall metal pillar, smooth, featureless. Standing in a rocky field under pale morning light, her archive completed the capture. Stored, she said. Elias nodded. Now we watch. The seconds passed slowly. Naomi felt the strange tension of waiting for something invisible. Some way thousands of miles away, a silent monolith stood beneath the open sky, and if their theory was correct, it was about to change the world. Then Elias's screen flashed. Anomaly detected, he said. Naomi sat upright. What changed? Elias opened a database entry. A historical record. Which one? Elias hesitated. That is unusual. What? Naomi asked. He turned the screen so she could see it. A familiar photograph appeared. The famous Apollo 11 moon landing image. Astronauts standing beside the American flag on the lunar surface. Naomi blinked. I've seen that picture 1,000 times. Yes, Elias said, and so have I. He opened the chronology mirror version beside it. Naomi leaned closer. Her breath caught. The astronaut in the mirrored archive stood slightly differently. The flag was positioned at another angle. Even the shadow across the lunar dust was different. Two versions of the same historic moment. Naomi whispered, "That's impossible." Then something else happened. Right before her eyes, the live version of the image flickered, just for a fraction of a second. Then it changed again. The astronaut's arm shifted position, the flag moved slightly. Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. Did you see that? Elias nodded slowly. Yes. They had just watched a moment of history rewrite itself live. Across every connected system in the world, Naomi checked her offline archive. Her version remained unchanged. The earlier image still existed, the previous reality preserved. Outside her apartment window, the city moved as normal. Cars passed. People walked along the sidewalk, completely unaware that the past had just shifted beneath their feet. Naomi turned back to Elias, her voice barely above a whisper. They're not correcting small things. Elias finished the thought grimly. They are adjusting the timeline itself. He zoomed the map out again.
The monolith in Turkey blinked on the screen as a new red marker. The geometric pattern grew larger, more complete. Naomi stared at it. A thought slowly formed in her mind. If every monolith activates another correction, she looked up at Elias. How many corrections are left before the system finishes? Elias did not answer right away. Instead, he pulled up a projection model on his screen. The geometric pattern rotated slowly. Nodes lighting up across the planet. Finally, he spoke. If my calculations are correct. He pointed to a massive empty region at the bottom of the map. Antarctica. The final activation point is here. At that exact moment, deep beneath miles of Antarctic ice, ancient machinery shifted for the first time in thousands of years. And something inside the buried structure began to wake. The servers in Naomi Calder's apartment hummed steadily into the early hours of morning. She hadn't moved from her desk in nearly an hour. The Apollo image still glowed on her screen. Two versions of history. Two moments on the moon that could not both be real. Across the Atlantic, Elias Navarro studied his monitors with the same quiet intensity. If the corrections are increasing in scale, Naomi said slowly, then eventually they'll change something people actually notice. Elias nodded. Yes, the previous Mandela effects were small enough to be dismissed as faulty memory. He paused, but eventually the system may alter something personal. Naomi gave a tired half-smile. That would certainly get people's attention. Before Elias could respond, Naomi's computer chimed again. Another anomaly alert. She straightened immediately. "Hold on," she said, opening the flagged archive. The alert came from one of her deep storage backups. A collection of archived news articles she had preserved years earlier. The file name caught her eye instantly. Local News Archive 2011. Naomi frowned. That's odd. "What is it?" Elias asked. "It's an old regional news archive. I saved it years ago while cataloging small newspapers that were shutting down." She opened the file, the screen filled with a list of headlines from over a decade ago. Naomi scrolled slowly, then stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. One headline stared back at her. "Local engineer killed in highway collision." The article preview displayed a familiar photograph. Naomi felt the room tilt slightly. "No," she whispered. Elias noticed the change in her voice. She clicked the article. The page opened. The photograph expanded. A man stood beside a small fishing boat, smiling at the camera. Gray hair, kind eyes. Her father. Naomi's heart began to pound. She read the article once, then again. The words blurred together. Thomas Calder, age 52, died Monday evening following a multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 40. Naomi slowly pushed her chair back from the desk. "That's wrong." Elias spoke carefully. "Naomi, what is it?" "My father didn't die in a car accident." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "He had a heart attack." Silence filled the call. Naomi quickly opened another window. She searched her personal archives. Family photographs, old emails, documents, everything told the same story. Her father had died suddenly from heart failure 12 years ago. That was the memory she carried. The funeral, the hospital, her mother crying quietly in the hallway. But the archived article on her screen insisted on something else. A highway crash, a completely different death. Her hands trembled slightly. "Elias, my offline backup shows the car accident version." He understood instantly, meaning the earlier timeline had recorded it that way, which meant the timeline correction had altered the cause of her father's death. Elias spoke gently. "The monolith system changed something in your personal history." Naomi stared at the screen. 1,000 memories suddenly felt uncertain. Why would it change something like that? She asked quietly. Elias didn't answer, because neither of them knew. Across the world, millions of people went about their lives unaware that a man named Thomas Calder had just died a completely different death. But Naomi remembered. She remembered the hospital room, the machines, the quiet moment when everything had gone still. She whispered softly, "That's not how it happened." Elsewhere, several floors underground in a secure government facility, a bank of monitors flickered to life. Rows of analysts watched streams of global data scrolling across massive screens. Satellite feeds, communication intercepts. Data anomaly reports. One alert blinked red, archival anomaly detected. SAO's private server, Nashville, Tennessee. A technician leaned closer.
That's the third anomaly tied to that system tonight. A tall man in a dark suit stepped forward, pulled the activity logs. The technician complied, lines of data appeared, encrypted communications, database comparisons, historical anomaly tracking. The suited man studied the screen silently, then asked one question: who owns that server? The technician typed quickly. A name appeared. Naomi Calder. The man folded his arms. Interesting. Another analyst spoke up. Sir, the system she's monitoring is flagging the same timeline anomalies we've been detecting near the monolith sites. The man's expression didn't change, but his voice hardened slightly. Begin passive observation. He turned away from the screens. For now, on the monitor, Naomi Calder's apartment network continued quietly analyzing the past, unaware that somewhere in the shadows, someone else had begun watching her.
Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of Naomi Calder's apartment. The light touched dozens of hard drives stacked neatly along the wall, their tiny indicator lights blinking in quiet rhythm. Naomi hadn't slept. Her father's photograph still sat open on one of the monitors. Two different versions of his death existed now. One memory in her mind, another in the historical record. She had stopped trying to reconcile them. Instead, she focused on something she could understand. Patterns. Across the Atlantic, Elias Navarro's office was dim despite the bright Spanish afternoon outside. Ancient stone walls surrounded modern machines, humming with quiet determination. His screens displayed maps of the world layered with glowing markers. Naomi's voice crackled softly through the call. Have you finished the calculations? Yes, Elias said, but I want you to see it. He rotated one of his monitors toward the camera. A map of Earth appeared. 7 red markers glowed across the continents. Utah, Romania, California, Nevada, Australia, Turkey, and another smaller location Naomi hadn't noticed before, each one marking a confirmed monolith appearance. Naomi nodded. That's all of them. No, Elias said quietly. That is only the beginning. He pressed a key. Thin white lines appeared between the markers. At first they looked random. But as more lines formed, a structure emerged. The pattern stretched across the planet like an enormous geometric web. Naomi leaned closer to her screen. Is that a grid? Elias shook his head. No. He zoomed the map outward slightly. The pattern shifted. The lines formed curved arcs rather than straight connections. A spiral. A locking spiral. Naomi felt a chill crawl up her spine. It looks like a mechanism. Elias nodded slowly. Yes. He tapped a few more keys. Additional markers appeared across the globe. Dozens of empty points. Locations where no monoliths had appeared yet. Future nodes. Naomi counted them quickly. 27 more. 26. Elias corrected. 26 additional activations. Naomi leaned back in her chair. That's 33 total. Yes. Elias enlarged the pattern again. Now the structure was unmistakable. The nodes formed massive rotating arcs across the planet's surface, like enormous gears.
or tumblers inside a vault lock. Naomi whispered, "Oh my God." Elias highlighted the center point of the pattern. The arcs converged at a single location, a massive white continent at the bottom of the map. Antarctica. Naomi stared at it. That's the final node. Yes. Elias ran another simulation. The arcs rotated slowly as new monolith nodes activated, each one aligning the planetary structure closer to completion. Naomi watched the simulation unfold. "It's not just a pattern," she said. "It's a sequence." "Yes." Elias nodded. "Each monolith is adjusting the system." "Adjusting what?" Elias paused, then answered quietly. "The timeline." Naomi looked at the simulation again. The arcs rotated into alignment. When the final node activated, the entire pattern locked into place. A massive planetary symbol formed. It resembled a keyhole. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. So when the last monolith appears, Elias finished the thought. The lock opens. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Naomi asked the question neither of them wanted to consider. What happens when it opens? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another window, a satellite scan of Antarctica. Deep ice mapping from international research surveys. The image revealed something strange beneath the frozen continent. An enormous geometric structure buried miles under the ice. Perfectly symmetrical, far too large to be natural. Naomi leaned closer. "What is that?" Elias shook his head slowly. "I do not know." He enlarged the scan. The structure resembled a colossal ring, or a gate. Naomi whispered, "That's what the monoliths are unlocking." Elias nodded. "Yes." Naomi felt a wave of unease wash through her. If this thing has been locked for thousands of years, she swallowed. Why would anyone open it now? Elias looked back toward the glowing world map. 26 empty nodes still waited. 26 more monoliths yet to appear. But something else caught his attention. A blinking notification. Another anomaly alert. He opened the report. His expression changed instantly. "Naomi." "What?" Elias turned his screen toward her. A new red marker blinked into existence. High in the mountains of northern China, another monolith had appeared. Naomi stared at the map. 7 had become 8. The mechanism had moved one step closer to completion.
But Elias wasn't looking at the marker. He was studying something else. The anomaly report attached to it. He read the line again slowly, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "This correction is much larger." Naomi's pulse quickened. How much larger? Elias turned the screen fully toward her. The anomaly report displayed a single line of analysis. Global historical variance detected. Naomi frowned. What does that mean? Elias looked directly at the camera. It means the last correction didn't change a single event. He paused. It changed something that affects the entire world. Naomi's voice was barely audible. What changed? Elias refreshed the historical database. The answer appeared immediately. And when Naomi saw it, the blood drained from her face. Because according to the new timeline, the Cold War had ended 10 years later than anyone remembered.
Naomi Calder stared at the screen in silence. The words refused to make sense. Cold War officially ended in 2001 following the Reykjavik Accords. She blinked. That's wrong. Across the ocean, Elias Navarro sat perfectly still. Yes. Naomi ran a search across multiple news databases. Every result said the same thing. The Cold War had ended in 2001, not 1991. Not with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The new timeline described a prolonged standoff that stretched another decade. Different treaties, different elections, different political alliances. Entire chapters of modern history had been rewritten. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she opened her offline archive. The older timeline appeared instantly. Cold War end, 1991. She placed the two versions side by side. The differences were staggering. Wars delayed. Technologies introduced years later. Economic collapses shifted. Even the dates of certain international space missions had changed. Naomi leaned back slowly. "That's not a correction," she whispered. "That's a rewrite." Elias nodded grimly. "And the scale is increasing." He zoomed out on the world map again. 8 red markers now glowed across the continents. The mechanism was turning, each activation pushing reality further away from what humanity remembered. Naomi's phone suddenly buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen. A message from her friend Jamie. "Hey, random question. Did the Cold War end in 2001 or 1991? Naomi's stomach tightened. She opened social media. Posts were exploding across every platform. People arguing, confused, alarmed. Wait, why do I remember the Cold War ending in 1991? Did history change? Is this another Mandela effect thing? News networks began picking it up. A commentator on a live broadcast spoke with visible confusion. Historians are currently discussing widespread public confusion regarding the official end date of the Cold War. Naomi muted the video. She looked back at Elias. "It's happening everywhere, yes." The ripple. Elias said quietly. Millions of people were noticing the shift, but for most of them it would fade. Human memory was flexible. Given enough time, people would accept the new timeline. Reality would settle into its updated form, but Naomi and Elias had something the rest of the world didn't: proof. 7 earlier versions of history preserved on isolated drives. 8 now. Naomi rubbed her temples. How many changes like this can the world absorb before people stop ignoring them? Elias didn't answer. Instead, he opened a new data stream. His monitoring software had detected something else, a new connection attempting to access Naomi's public network node. Naomi noticed the alert too. What is that? Elias studied the incoming signal. It's not a hacker. How do you know? Because they are not trying to enter. He paused. They are observing. Naomi felt a chill. Her system logs began filling with connection attempts from multiple relay servers, professional infrastructure, government-level routing. "Someone is watching my system," she said. "Yes." Elias's voice was calm but firm. "And if they are watching you, they will soon know about me." Underground facility, location classified. The massive monitoring room buzzed with quiet urgency. Rows of analysts scanned global anomaly reports. The Cold War timeline shift had triggered alerts across multiple intelligence agencies. The tall man in the dark suit stood behind them, hands folded behind his back. Status. An analyst spoke quickly. Global historical variants confirmed across all connected systems. Cause? Unknown.
Another analyst pointed to a screen. But we've identified 2 civilian systems tracking the anomaly pattern. The screen displayed 2 names: Naomi Calder, United States, alias Navarro, Spain. The man studied the profiles carefully. Archivists, he said. Yes, sir. They're preserving older versions of the timeline. The man watched the screens for a long moment, then spoke quietly. They're ahead of us. He turned toward the door. Prepare a contact team. The analyst looked surprised. You want to detain them? The man shook his head. No. His expression remained unreadable. We may need their help. Back in Naomi's apartment, Naomi stared at the system log scrolling across her monitor. Elias. Yes, they're not hiding. What do you mean? The observers. Naomi leaned closer to the screen. They want me to know they're here. At that exact moment, her phone rang. Unknown number. Naomi and Elias looked at each other through the screen. Naomi hesitated, then answered. Hello.
A calm voice spoke from the other end. Miss Calder. The voice carried the quiet confidence of someone used to being obeyed. My name is Director Halverson. He paused. We need to talk about the monoliths. Naomi felt the world shift again. But this time, it wasn't history changing. It was the story getting bigger.
Naomi held the phone against her ear. The voice on the other end was calm, controlled, the kind of voice that belonged to someone accustomed to speaking during crises. Miss Calder, the man said again, I imagine you have many questions. Naomi glanced at Elias on the video call. Who are you? My name is Director Halverson. A brief pause followed. I oversee a program that monitors global anomalies. Naomi frowned. What kind of anomalies? Another short pause. The same ones you've been tracking. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. You mean the monoliths? Yes. Her chair creaked slightly as she leaned forward. You've been watching them too? Halverson's voice remained steady. For longer than you might expect. Across the Atlantic, Elias listened silently, his eyes narrowing slightly. Naomi asked the question that had already formed in both their minds. How long? Halverson answered without hesitation. Since 1958. The room seemed to shrink around Naomi. That's impossible, she said. The first monolith appeared in 2020. Yes, Halverson replied. The first public monolith. Naomi felt a cold knot form in her stomach. You're saying there were others? Yes. Elias spoke for the first time. How many? Halverson's answer came quietly. 17. Naomi's eyes widened. 17? Hidden. Halverson said most discovered in remote regions, Arctic ice shelves, desert interiors, ocean trenches. And you kept them secret, Naomi said. It was necessary. Why? The voice on the phone lowered slightly. Because every time a monolith activates, Naomi finished the sentence. History changes. Yes. Elias leaned forward in his chair. You call this program the Lock Protocol. There was a brief silence on the line. You've been doing your homework, Mr. Navarro. So it is a lock, Elias said. Yes. Naomi asked the next question carefully. What is it locking? Halverson did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something new. Not fear, but gravity. We are still trying to determine that. Naomi almost laughed. You've been studying this since the 1950s and you don't know what it locks. We know where the lock is. Naomi and Elias exchanged a look. Antarctica, Naomi said. Yes. Halverson continued. In 1958, a joint scientific expedition detected something beneath the Antarctic ice sheet during early seismic surveys. Something artificial. Naomi leaned forward. The structure Elias found. Yes, Halverson said. It is approximately 20 kilometers across and buried nearly 2 miles beneath the ice. Naomi tried to picture it. A structure the size of a city hidden beneath the frozen continent. Why didn't anyone investigate it, she asked. We tried. Halverson's voice grew quiet again. Every attempt to drill toward the structure resulted in catastrophic equipment failures. Mechanical failures. No. What then? Halverson answered simply. Reality failures. Neither Naomi nor Elias spoke. Halverson continued. Navigation systems malfunctioned, coordinates shifted, satellite imaging contradicted ground surveys. Expeditions became disoriented. Several teams reported memories that no longer matched recorded events. Naomi felt a chill spread through her. The Mandela effect. Yes, Halverson said. The closer we got to the structure, the more unstable the timeline became. Elias spoke slowly. The monolith system is stabilizing the timeline. That is our current theory. Naomi asked the question that had been sitting like a stone in her chest. If the monoliths are stabilizing the timeline, why are the changes getting bigger? For the first time since the core began, Halverson hesitated. Because the answer was the one thing none of them wanted to hear. Because the lock is failing. The words settled heavily in the room. Halverson continued. Our data suggests the monolith network is attempting to repair itself. Naomi glanced at the world map beside her desk. 8 nodes active. 25 still missing. So the monoliths aren't unlocking the structure, she said. They're trying to keep it closed. Yes. Elias leaned back slowly. And if the system fails? Halverson's answer came quietly. We believe the structure beneath Antarctica is not a machine. Naomi swallowed. What is it? Halverson said the words carefully. A tear. A fracture in space-time itself.
The room fell silent. Then Naomi asked the question that changed everything. What happens if the fracture opens? Halvorsen did not answer immediately. Instead, he said something far worse. Miss Calder. Yes. Our latest projections indicate the final monolith will appear within 6 months. Naomi stared at the glowing map of the world. 33 nodes. 25 still missing. A planetary lock slowly turning. And beneath the Antarctic ice, something was trying to break through.
Naomi's apartment was quiet again. Too quiet. The rain had returned outside, tapping softly against the windows as if the night itself were trying to get her attention. On her desk, the glowing screens displayed the 7 alternate timelines Elias had preserved in his chronology mirror. 7 different versions of Earth, 7 slightly different histories. Until now, they had only examined the small differences. Dates, political events, technological shifts. But Naomi kept staring at the final file, the one labeled 2024 Variant 7. Elias, she said quietly, "Yes, I think you missed something." Across the Atlantic, Elias leaned closer to his screen. "What did you find?" Naomi opened the timeline. The historical record began normally: Cold War, space missions, elections. Everything looked familiar until the year 2031. Then the records became strange. News headlines began appearing that Naomi had never seen before. She read one slowly. Global communication disruptions reported following Antarctic event. Another. Multiple countries reported drone navigation failures. Naomi felt a chill crawl up her spine. Elias, this timeline keeps going. Elias blinked. That should not be possible. The preserved timelines were supposed to represent previous versions of history, not the future. Yet the archive extended years beyond the present. Naomi scrolled further. The headlines became worse. Worldwide memory instability reported. Entire cities report conflicting historical records. Scientists warn timeline collapse may be irreversible. Naomi stopped scrolling. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "This is the timeline where the lock failed." Elias stared silently. "Yes," he said. "And it appears someone tried to repair it." Naomi looked up. "What do you mean?" Elias opened a section near the bottom of the archive. A classified research summary appeared. The document described something called the Archivist Initiative. Naomi leaned closer. The summary read, "In response to the Antarctic fracture breach, surviving researchers initiated temporal message transmission attempts using pre-collapse digital networks." Naomi frowned. Temporal messages. Elias nodded slowly. They attempted to send information backward through time. Warnings. Yes. Elias enlarged the document. One paragraph was highlighted. Primary transmission vectors include anonymous message boards, early decentralized internet forums, and archive communication networks resistant to timeline overwrites. Naomi suddenly froze. Her eyes widened. Elias. "Yes. I think I know where they sent them." She opened one of her deep storage archives. An enormous collection of early internet forums, image boards, discussion threads. Data she had preserved for historical research years ago. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. Then the screen filled with something Elias recognized instantly. A series of strange cryptic posts, anonymous, short, mysterious, each signed with a single letter. Q. Elias leaned forward slowly. The Q posts. Naomi nodded. "I archived all of them back in 2017. She opened the first entry. A short message appeared on the screen. Cryptic. Fragmented. But suddenly, with new context, it looked different. Less like conspiracy. More like instructions. Naomi opened another. And another. Each post contained strange references. Future dates, coordinates, phrases that made no sense when they were originally written. But now Naomi pulled up the global map again. She compared the coordinates embedded in several posts. Her breath caught. "Elias, what is it?"
She overlaid the coordinates. They aligned perfectly with several known monolith locations: Utah, Romania, Turkey. Naomi's voice trembled. These weren't conspiracy posts. Elias finished the thought. They were instructions. Naomi scrolled through another archived thread. This one contained a strange phrase repeated several times. Markers must rise. Stabilize the sequence. Prevent fracture cascade. Naomi leaned back slowly. The future researchers were trying to guide us, to build the monolith system. Elias nodded. Yes. Naomi stared at the screen filled with cryptic posts from years ago. The internet thought they were nonsense, but they were warnings. She looked back at the Antarctica structure on the map. The monoliths aren't random. They're being placed intentionally. Elias spoke softly. By people in the future. Naomi felt the weight of the realization settle over her.
Somewhere in a collapsing future timeline, humanity had tried to save itself by sending instructions backward through time, through anonymous posts on forgotten corners of the internet. Naomi whispered, "So the monoliths." Elias finished the sentence. A humanity repairing its own past. Outside the apartment window, thunder rolled faintly across the sky, and thousands of miles away, beneath the Antarctic ice, the massive buried structure pulsed once, as if something on the other side of reality had just noticed them.
The control room was silent. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty office. The tense quiet that settles in when something impossible appears on a screen and no one knows what to say. Rows of monitors illuminated the dim chamber deep beneath a government facility. Antarctica filled the largest display. A frozen continent glowing pale blue under layers of satellite-imagined data. An analyst leaned closer to the console. "Director, you need to see this." Director Halverson stepped forward. "What am I looking at?" The analyst pointed to a pulsing distortion buried beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. Subsurface energy surge detected 3 minutes ago. Halverson studied the data. How deep? Approximately 3 kilometers. The analyst zoomed in. The shape beneath the ice became visible again. The massive ring structure first detected in the 1950s, 20 kilometers across, ancient, perfectly symmetrical. And now, it was glowing. Not with light, but with energy. The readings fluctuated in strange patterns that the system struggled to interpret. Gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic distortions, temporal variance, spikes. Halverson's voice remained calm, but his eyes hardened. "It's active." Naomi was still studying the Q archive when Elias's voice suddenly cut through the call. "Naomi, what?" I believe Halverson was correct. About what? The lock failing. Elias turned his monitor toward the camera. A live satellite feed appeared. Antarctica. A cluster of red warning indicators blinked across the screen. Naomi frowned. "What am I looking at?" "Energy fluctuations beneath the ice. How strong?" Elias checked the readings again. His expression darkened. "Stronger than anything recorded since the lock protocol began." Naomi's stomach tightened. "That means the fracture is reacting." As if on cue, Naomi's monitors flickered. Just for a second. Her servers hummed louder as data streams updated rapidly. Another anomaly alert appeared, then another, and another. Historical records began shifting again. But this time, the changes weren't subtle. Entire news articles vanished, new headlines appeared. Naomi watched one story rewrite itself in real time. She whispered, "Oh no, what changed?" Elias asked. Naomi refreshed the page. Her voice was barely steady. "It's not just the past." "What do you mean?" "The future changed." Elias froze. Naomi turned the screen towards him. A brand new headline from a major international science journal appeared. Dated 6 months from now, Antarctic structure breach confirmed. Elias stared at it. "That article shouldn't exist." "I know." Naomi opened the metadata. The timestamp confirmed it. The article had been published in a future that had not yet happened. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We're seeing the timeline where the lock fails." Far below the frozen surface where sunlight had never reached, the ancient structure pulsed again. The massive ring embedded in the bedrock vibrated softly, a ripple spread outward through space-time itself, invisible but measurable, and something beyond the fracture felt it, across a distance that could not be measured in miles or light years. Something became aware. The fracture widened by a fraction of a millimeter. For the first time in thousands of years, something moved on the other side, back in the control room. An alarm suddenly blared. The analyst jumped. "What happened?" Halverson demanded. The technician stared at the screen in disbelief. "Director, the anomaly spike just doubled." "How?" "We don't know." Another analyst spoke up. "Sir, we just detected something else." Halverson turned. "What?" The analyst zoomed in on the energy signature. The pulsing pattern shifted, then repeated again. Halverson frowned. "That's not random." "No, sir." The analyst swallowed. "It's structured." Halverson leaned closer. "Structured how?" The technician ran a quick signal analysis. The computer translated the pattern into something human eyes could recognize. A repeating sequence. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. Halverson felt a cold realization settle in his chest. "It's a signal." The analyst nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." Halverson asked the question none of them wanted answered. "Is it coming from the fracture?" The technician shook his head. "No." "Then where?" The room fell silent because the signal wasn't coming through the fracture. It was coming from the other side. Naomi watched the anomaly alerts stack across her monitors. "Elias, yes?" "The future timeline is changing again." "What does it say now?" She refreshed the article. The headline had updated. Her voice trembled slightly as she read it.
A first contact event confirmed following Antarctic breach. Naomi slowly leaned back in her chair. The monolith system was trying to repair the lock. Future humanity was sending instructions backward through time. The fracture beneath Antarctica was beginning to open, and something on the other side had just sent a signal. Naomi whispered the only question that mattered now. What if they're not trying to break in? Elias finished the thought quietly. What if they're trying to get out? Outside, thunder rolled across the sky again, and somewhere beneath the Antarctic ice, the fracture widened just a little more.
The signal repeated every 30 seconds. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. Pause. In the underground monitoring facility, the analysts stared at the scrolling data as computers struggled to categorize the anomaly. Director Halvorsen folded his arms. "Run pattern analysis." "We already did, sir," the technician said. "And? It's not random noise." The man turned his screen toward the director. "It's structured." Naomi had already reached the same conclusion. Her servers were processing the signal data Elias had forwarded from the Antarctic monitoring network. The waveform pulsed rhythmically across her screen. 3, 3, 3, she murmured. Elias watched quietly from his office in Seville. That pattern should be familiar. Naomi nodded slowly. Yes. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, converting the signal into digital intervals. Dots, dashes, dots. She froze. Elias. Yes. It's Morse code. He leaned closer. What does it say? Naomi ran the translation. The computer printed the result across her screen. A single word appeared. Archivist. Naomi felt a cold shiver run through her. That's not possible. What is it? Elias asked. It addressed me. How? The message says, Archivist. Elias frowned. That could be coincidence. Naomi shook her head slowly. No. She opened another archive. The queue posts again. One message stood out now in a way it hadn't before. The Archivist will preserve the path, Naomi whispered. They knew. Elias nodded slowly. The future researchers, yes. They expected someone like you to find the instructions. Halvorson's phone rang. He answered immediately. Director. The voice on the other end belonged to a NASA liaison officer. Director Halvorson, we've detected the same signal your team is analyzing. That's not surprising, but that's not why I'm calling. Halvorson's expression darkened. Go on. The signal isn't strongest at the Antarctic monitoring stations. Where is it strongest? The answer came with quiet astonishment. The moon. Halvorson blinked. The moon? Yes. Our Artemis lunar station detected the signal nearly 40% stronger than any Earth sensor. Halvorson turned slowly toward the giant screen displaying Antarctica. Explain. The scientist continued. Whatever the fracture is doing to space-time, it's distorting signals across Earth. But the moon is outside most of the interference. Halvorson understood instantly. The moon is a stable observation point. Yes. And Artemis already has astronauts there. Naomi's screen flickered again. Another portion of the signal appeared. Longer this time. More complex. Elias watched the waveform carefully. This is not just a signal. What do you mean? Naomi asked. It's increasing. Naomi converted the pulses again. The Morse output appeared slowly. 2 words, Artemis node. Naomi stared at the screen. The moon. Elias nodded. The Artemis missions. Naomi opened another document from the Future Timeline archive. One she had overlooked earlier. A classified scientific report dated 2033. She read the title aloud. Lunar Stabilization Array Artemis Station. Elias frowned. What is that? Naomi scrolled. The moon base becomes part of the lock system. How? The report says the Artemis program eventually installs something colder. She stopped reading. Timeline anchor. Elias leaned back slowly. That explains why the signal is strongest there. The moon is stable. Yes. Naomi whispered. It's the only place where the fracture can't distort reality. Deep beneath the ice, the fracture widened again. The signal pulsed outward through space-time. Stronger now. More deliberate. More focused. And somewhere far above Earth. On the quiet gray plains of the moon. The Artemis station received the message clearly. Commander Lena Volkov floated near the observation window of the lunar habitat. Earth hung in the black sky like a fragile blue lantern. Behind her, the communications console beeped again. Another signal packet. She frowned. That's the 4th one. Her crewmate looked up from the monitor. What does it say? Volkov read the decoded message slowly. Her expression changed. That's strange. What? She turned the screen toward him. The translated signal displayed only 3 words. Find the Archivist. Naomi stared at the signal log. Her hands were suddenly cold. Elias. Yes. The signal isn't random. No. It's calling for someone. Elias already knew the answer. Yes, Naomi swallowed. It's calling for me. Outside, the clouds parted slightly. Moonlight spilled across Naomi's desk. And somewhere on the lunar surface, the Artemis crew began searching Earth for the person the signal was calling. The archivist.
The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of Naomi's servers. Moonlight spilled across the desk, silver reflections gliding across the metal casings of stacked hard drives on the screen in front of her. Thousands of archived cube posts scrolled slowly past. Years of strange cryptic messages. For most of the world, they had been nothing more than internet noise. But now Naomi looked at them with different eyes, not conspiracy, not riddles, instructions. Across the Atlantic, Elias watched silently as Naomi searched the archive. "What exactly are we looking for?" I asked. Naomi didn't look up. "Patterns. There are thousands of posts. I know." Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Future archivists wouldn't leave random clues. They would leave a system. She ran a program that extracted every reference containing coordinates, numbers, or directional language. The results filled her monitor. Elias leaned closer. "That's a lot of data." Naomi nodded. "Yes." Then she froze. One phrase appeared again and again across multiple posts. 3 simple words. "Watch the water." Elias noticed it too. That phrase repeated 17 times. Naomi leaned back slowly. "That's not coincidence." She highlighted the posts. Each message containing the phrase also contained something else, a number or a date or a strange set of coordinates. Naomi pulled up the global monolith map again. 8 active nodes glowed across the planet. She began overlaying the Q coordinates. Utah, Romania, Turkey, several matched perfectly. Elias exhaled slowly. The post predicted the monolith locations, yes. But that's not the interesting part. Naomi zoomed the map outward. She placed every coordinate referenced in the Q drops across the globe. Dozens of markers appeared, but something about them looked strange. Elias squinted. "Most of them are near coastlines." Naomi nodded. "Exactly." She pointed to the phrase again. "Watch the water." They weren't telling people to look at oceans. They were telling us to use the oceans as reference points. Elias tilted his head slightly. Reference points for what? Naomi adjusted the map projection. She switched from political borders to global bathymetric data. The map changed instantly. Earth's oceans revealed their hidden geography, mountain ranges beneath the sea, deep trenches, ancient tectonic scars. Naomi began overlaying the Q coordinates again. Elias suddenly leaned forward. "Wait." The markers were no longer scattered. They aligned along long arcs across the ocean floor, invisible structures beneath the water. Naomi whispered, "Oh my God, what is it?" Elias asked. "The monolith network." She zoomed further. The arcs stretched across the oceans like giant curved lines, converging, intersecting, forming a massive spiral lock pattern Elias had discovered earlier. But now something new appeared, a final node, one that had not yet activated. Elias stared. "That location isn't on land." "No." Naomi zoomed further. The coordinates rested deep in the Pacific Ocean, far from any coastline, thousands of miles from civilization. Elias checked the depth data, his eyebrows lifted. "That's impossible." "How deep?" Naomi asked. 11,000 meters. Naomi recognized the number instantly. "The Mariana Trench." "Yes." She leaned closer. "That's the deepest place on Earth." Elias nodded slowly, which means whatever is there has been hidden from humanity longer than any other location on the planet. Naomi stared at the glowing marker. "So the final monolith is underwater." "Yes." Elias paused, and extremely deep underwater. Naomi looked back at the Q archive. One final post caught her attention. She opened it. The message was short, cryptic, but now the meaning was suddenly clear. "When the water moves, the lock turns." Naomi felt a chill. "Elias." "Yes."
The trench, what about it? She pulled up recent seismic data, the ocean floor map updated, and Naomi's breath caught. The Mariana Trench was shifting, slowly. A massive tectonic disturbance rippled through the seabed. Elias saw it too, the monolith activation. Naomi whispered, "It's beginning."
Elverson looked at the satellite display again, then spoke quietly. "Contact NASA." The analyst blinked. "NASA?" "Yes." Halverson's eyes remained fixed on the map, because if the fracture continues widening, Earth may not be the place where the final key is activated. Naomi stared at the trench coordinates. "Elias." "Yes." "What if the final monolith doesn't rise from the ocean?" Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Naomi looked at the message again. "Watch the order." Then she looked up at the moon glowing through her window. What if it rises somewhere else instead? The Mariana Trench glowed on Naomi's screen like a wound in the earth. A thin red marker pulsed at its deepest point. 10,935 meters below it. The ocean floor was hidden in darkness so complete that sunlight had never touched it. Naomi leaned closer to the monitor. "Elias, run the full simulation." Across the Atlantic, Elias typed quickly. The global monolith grid rotated slowly across his screen. 8 active nodes, 24 dormant ones, and the final trench node now flashing like a heartbeat. The pattern began turning again. The spiral tightened. Lines crossed continents and oceans. The entire mechanism shifted toward completion. Naomi whispered, "Show the final lock position." Elias pressed a key. The simulation froze. A bright line shot upward from the Mariana Trench, straight through Earth's atmosphere, straight past low-orbit satellites, straight past the International Space Station. The line continued. Naomi felt her stomach drop. It stopped at a single point in space, the moon specifically, Artemis Lunar Station. Elias stared silently. "That's not possible." Naomi's voice was quiet. "Yes, it is. The final node isn't in the trench. No, it's above it." Elias leaned back slowly. "The trench is only the anchor." Naomi nodded. "The lock completes at the moon." Commander Lena Volkov floated near the navigation console. Earth turned slowly outside the observational window. Blue, beautiful, fragile. Her crewmate frowned at the signal monitor. The message changed again. Volkov turned. "What does it say now?" The decoded transmission appeared on the screen. "Archivist located. Alignment requirement. Artemis node critical." Volkov sighed. "Great. What? That sounds important." Another alert chimed. The station's astronomical sensors automatically recalibrated. Something new had appeared on their sky map. A faint beam of energy rising from Earth. Her crewmate zoomed in. The beam originated in the Pacific Ocean. The Mariana Trench. Volkov's eyes narrowed. "And it's pointing directly at us." Naomi ran the same projection. The beam from the trench aligned perfectly with the moon, with Artemis Station sitting precisely at the intersection point. She whispered, "That's the keyhole." Elias nodded slowly. "And the moon is the key." Naomi suddenly opened another Q post, one she had overlooked before. The message was short. Just a single line. "The key must turn where the sky is still." She looked up at Elias. The moon, yes, no atmosphere, no timeline distortion, no shifting history.
perfect stability. Elias finished the thought. The only place the lock can be completed. Director Halverson studied the same alignment data. An analyst spoke nervously.
So, if the Artemis station is the final node.
Halverson nodded grimly. And the astronauts just became the most important people in human history. Another technician spoke up. There's something else. What? The fracture energy spike just increased again. Halverson turned. How much? 30%. Another analyst whispered, something's pushing through. Deep beneath the ice, the fracture widened, reality twisted slightly around it. The ancient ring structure burst faster, and the signal from the other side changed. No longer simple pulses. Now it carried structure, language, intention. Something beyond the fracture had realized the lock was being repaired, and it didn't like it. Volkov stared at the being rising from Earth. It was faint but unmistakable. A line of energy stretching from the deepest ocean to the moon. Our console beeped again. Another signal packet arrived. She opened it. A message appeared instantly. 3 words. Her eyes widened. Ah, Houston. Go ahead, Artemis. Volkov read the message slowly. Whatever is down there. She swallowed. It just sent us another transmission. And what does it say? Volkov stared at the screen. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Do not turn the key.
The message from the moon sat frozen on Naomi's monitor. Do not turn the key. Naomi read it again. Across the Atlantic, Elias sat perfectly still. That message didn't come from the Artemis crew. No, Naomi said. And it didn't come from NASA. Elias nodded. It came through the fracture. Naomi pulled up the signal logs. The transmission path traced backward from the moon, down the energy beam, across the Pacific, and deep into Antarctica. Straight into the ancient ring structure buried beneath the ice. She whispered, "That's where it came from." Elias leaned forward. Then something on the other side of the fracture just spoke to us. Director Halverson stood in the center of the control room as alarms quietly pulsed across multiple screens. Signal analysis? An analyst spoke. It's not a simple broadcast. What does that mean? It's targeted. Halverson frowned. Targeted how? It was directed specifically at the Artemis node. Another technician added. And at Naomi Calder's network, Halverson's eyes narrowed. It knows who she is. Naomi's heart beat faster. Elias, yes? I think it's been talking to us for a long time. He frowned. What do you mean? Naomi opened a new window, the Mandela Effect archive. Hundreds of strange memory discrepancies recorded over the last few decades. Logos, movies, historical events. Small distortions scattered through culture. She highlighted a section. These started increasing dramatically in the early 2000s. Elias nodded, yes. Naomi opened the Q archive beside it, then the monolith timeline, then the fracture anomaly reports. She layered all 3 datasets. The pattern appeared instantly. Elias saw it too. Not all of the timeline shifts came from monolith activations. No, Naomi zoomed in. Several Mandela effects occurred before certain monoliths appeared. Her voice dropped. Those weren't corrections. Elias finished the thought. They were interference. Naomi leaned back slowly. The thing beyond the fracture has been trying to destabilize the timeline for decades. Elias nodded. Every shift weakens the lock, and the monolith network has been correcting them. Yes, Naomi whispered. It's a tug of war across history.
Deep beneath the frozen continent, the ancient ring pulsed again. The fracture widened. For a moment, space-time stretched thin enough to reveal something beyond it. A presence that did not experience time the way humans did. To it, history was not a straight line. It was a field, a landscape, and it had been pushing against the lock for centuries, shifting events, altering memories, testing the boundaries of the prison. Now it sensed something dangerous. The key was almost in position. The moon. If the key turned, the fracture would close permanently and the entity would be trapped forever. Commander Volkov floated beside the console. The beam from Earth now shone clearly against the darkness of space. The crewmate shook his head slowly. Houston wants us to hold position. Volkov nodded. Until they understand what we're dealing with. The signal monitor peaked again. Another transmission arrived. She sighed. Please don't be another creepy message. The screen flickered. The words appeared slowly. You do not understand, Volkov exhaled. Yeah. There it is. Naomi stared at the growing signal stream. More messages now, faster, more urgent. The entity was communicating directly. Elias studied the pattern. This is not random. No, Naomi decoded another message. 3 words appeared. The lock is wrong, she frowned. That doesn't make sense. Elias leaned forward. What if it does? What do you mean? What if the lock was never meant to imprison it? Naomi's heart skipped slightly. Then what was it meant to do? Elias answered slowly. What if it was meant to keep something else out? Naomi felt a cold wave of realization. 2 sides. Yes. She stared at the fracture map again. If that thing escapes. Elias finished a thought. Something worse may follow. Alverson watched the Artemis station telemetry. The alignment is almost complete. An analyst nodded. The beam from the trench is stabilizing. Halverson turned. Time until full alignment. Less than 4 hours. Another technician spoke. Sir, the fracture energy just doubled again. Halverson stared at the Antarctic display. The ring beneath the ice glowed brighter now. Something was pushing hard against the barrier. Hard enough that the timeline itself was beginning to bend. He whispered, "We're running out of time." Naomi looked at the moon shining outside her window. Then at the message still blinking on her screen. Do not turn the key. She whispered softly. Why are you so afraid of the lock closing? The response came almost instantly. We are not the prisoners.
The message lingered on Naomi's screen. We are not the prisoners. The words seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. Naomi leaned back slowly in her chair. That doesn't make sense. Across the ocean, Elias Navarro stared at the same message. No, he said softly, but it explained something. Naomi looked up. What? Elias opened a new data window. The age of the Antarctic structure. He pulled up seismic surveys gathered by the Lock Protocol over the past 70 years. The ring structure beneath the ice had been studied for decades, not directly. No one had ever reached it. But its shape and density had been mapped through deep seismic imaging. Elias highlighted the oldest layer of surrounding rock. The structure is embedded in bedrock that formed roughly. He paused.
65 million years ago. Naomi blinked. That's the extinction event. Yes, the same period that wiped out the dinosaurs. Naomi leaned closer. You think the two events are connected? Elias nodded. It's possible. Naomi felt a strange chill. So something arrived on Earth 65 million years ago, and someone built a lock around it. Yes. Elias opened another file, an obscure geological anomaly report from Antarctica. A strange layer of crystalline minerals found deep beneath the ice. Materials that didn't match any known terrestrial formation. Naomi frowned. That's not rock, no. Elias zoomed in. It's manufactured. The room went silent. Naomi whispered, "Someone built the lock." Yes. But who? Director Halverson stood before the giant Antarctic display. One of the analysts approached carefully. "Sir, we recovered something from the fracture signal." "What kind of signal?" "A data packet." Halverson turned. "From the entity?" "Yes." "What does it contain?" The analyst hesitated. "Images." Halverson folded his arms. "Show me." The screen flickered. A strange image appeared. A star system, not one recognized by modern astronomy. Several planets circled a bright blue-white star. Another image appeared. A civilization. Towering structures of dark metal rising above alien landscapes. Strange geometric architecture far beyond human technology. Halverson whispered, "The builders." The next image appeared. A massive ring structure in space, nearly identical to the Antarctic structure. Except this one surrounded an entire planet. The analyst spoke quietly. "They built locks like ours, many of them." Halverson stared at the images. "Why?" Naomi and Elias watched the same images forwarded by the lock protocol. Naomi whispered, "They're not human." "No." Elias studied the alien architecture, but they were incredibly advanced. Naomi zoomed into one of the images. The massive planetary ring structure glowed with the same energy patterns as the Antarctic lock. "This wasn't just a prison," she said. "It was a containment network." Elias nodded. "Across multiple worlds." Naomi frowned. "So the fracture under Antarctica was part of something much larger." "Yes," she whispered. "A war." Elias looked up. "That's exactly what it appears to be." Far beneath the ice, the fracture pulsed violently. For a moment the barrier thinned, and another message burst through. Naomi's monitors translated the signal instantly. "The builders feared us." Naomi read the words aloud. "They feared us?" Elias frowned. "Why?" Another signal arrived, longer this time. The translation appeared slowly. "We do not destroy worlds, we consume time." Naomi felt her chest tighten. "What does that mean?" Elias stared at the screen. "I think it means they feed on timelines." Naomi suddenly understood. The Mandela effects, the timeline distortions. The entity had been eating pieces of history, rewriting events, testing reality, feeding on the instability. She whispered, "It's not trying to escape Earth." "No." Elias nodded slowly. "It's trying to escape time itself." Commander Volkov watched the beam from Earth grow brighter. The alignment was nearly complete. Her crewmate checked the countdown. 2 hours until full lock alignment. Volkov nodded. The console Naomi stared at the moon. The alignment beam from the Mariana Trench now stretched perfectly into space. The key was almost in position, but the final message from the fracture still haunted her. "We are not the prisoners," she whispered softly. "If that thing isn't the prisoner, what is?" Elias looked back at the ancient alien images, the massive locks around distant worlds, and one terrible possibility formed in his mind. What if the builders weren't locking something in? Naomi's voice trembled slightly. Then what were they doing? Elias answered quietly. What if they were locking something out? A thin silver line stretched from the Pacific Ocean into space, pointing directly towards the moon. But Naomi Calder knew exactly what it was. The final alignment. Every screen in Naomi's apartment displayed the same simulation, the planetary lock mechanism. 33 nodes. 32 were either active or forming. Only one remained incomplete. The Artemis node. Naomi leaned forward. Elias, the system is almost ready. Across the Atlantic, Elias Navarro watched the same data scroll across his monitors. Yes, but there is still a missing component. Naomi nodded. The final monolith. Elias frowned, but there is no physical monolith on the moon, no. Naomi turned her chair slowly toward the wall of hard drives behind her, and there never was supposed to be. Elias suddenly understood. The archivist. Naomi nodded. The final key isn't a structure, it's a record. Commander Lena Volkov floated near the central control console. The alignment beam now connected Earth and the moon like a glowing thread. Her crewmate checked the telemetry. Alignment stability at 98%. Volkov exhaled slowly. So, what are we waiting for? Another transmission arrived from Earth from Naomi. Volkov opened a message. A massive data file appeared. Her eyes widened. That's a lot of information. Her crewmate glanced over. What is it? Volkov read the title aloud. Primary Timeline Archive. Naomi's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. Thousands of historical files streamed through the transmission channel. Every preserved timeline, every version of history Elias had saved, every archived record Naomi had protected. 17 variations of Earth's past. Elias watched quietly. You're sending them all, yes. The Artemis node needs a complete timeline map. Elias nodded slowly. So the system can decide which one to stabilize. Naomi paused. That's the part that worries me. What do you mean? The alignment simulation had changed. Instead of selecting one timeline automatically, the system displayed a single message. Archivist input required. Naomi felt her chest tighten. It's waiting for me. Director Halverson stared at the same message appearing across the lock protocol network. Archivist input? An analyst nodded. Yes, sir. The system requires Naomi Calder to finalize the timeline. Halverson folded his arms, meaning the fate of history now depends on one civilian archivist. The analyst swallowed. Yes, sir. Halverson whispered quietly. God help us. The fracture beneath the ice roared with energy. Reality bent like heated glass around the ancient ring. The entity beyond the barrier felt the lock tightening. Its signals became frantic. Messages flooded Naomi's servers. You do not understand. This timeline's broken. Turn away. Naomi stared at the messages. Her hands trembled slightly above the keyboard. What if it's telling the truth, she whispered. Elias shook his head slowly. It feeds on broken timelines, yes. But what if this one is already too damaged? Outside her window, the moon hung silently above the horizon. The Artemis station floated there like a small silver island in space, waiting. Commander Volkov watched the incoming data stream from Earth. The archive filled the station's computer memory. Hundreds of alternate histories, 17 versions of humanity, she muttered quietly. That's a lot of reality to choose from. Her crewmate checked the system timer. 30 minutes until alignment lock. Volkov tapped the console. Naomi better make up her mind. Naomi stared at the timelines. 17 different versions of Earth. Some were worse, some were better, some were almost identical. But none were perfect. She whispered softly, "There's no such thing as the right timeline." Elias nodded. "Only the one that survives." Naomi looked at the final system prompt, "Select primary reality." Her heart pounded. If she chose wrong, the entity might escape, or something worse might happen. Then Naomi noticed something strange. A small anomaly buried deep inside every timeline. One tiny event that never changed. Not once. Across all 17 histories, she whispered, "That's it." Elias leaned closer. "What is it?" Naomi smiled faintly. "The constant." "What constant?" She pointed to the data. One thing exists in every timeline. The moon. Elias frowned. "That's obvious." "No." Naomi shook her head. "The Artemis program." She highlighted the data across every version of history. Humanity eventually returned to the moon. Elias leaned back slowly. "The builders planned it." "Yes." Naomi whispered. "The moon was always meant to be the key." She looked at the system prompt one last time. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's finish the lock." The moon hung silent above the earth, a pale sphere floating in the black ocean of space. From the depths of the Pacific Ocean, the beam from the Mariana Trench stretched upward like a silver thread connecting two worlds. Commander Lena Volkov floated at the command console. The station's computers hummed as Naomi Calder's archive finished uploading. 17 timelines, 17 versions of human history, each one a fragile path through the chaos of time. Her crewmate checked the alignment monitor. 10 seconds until lock synchronization. Volkov nodded. "Naomi?" Naomi's voice came through the comm channel. "I'm here. Are you ready?" Naomi looked at the glowing prompt on her screen, "Select primary reality." Her hands trembled slightly. Across the Atlantic, Elias Navarro watched quietly. "You found the constant," he said. "Yes, the moon." "And the archivist," Elias added. Naomi smiled faintly. "I guess every lock needs someone to turn the key." Beneath miles of ancient ice, the fracture howled with energy. The alien ring structure glowed like a star trapped beneath the earth. The entity beyond the barrier felt the lock tightening. Its signals poured through the thinning fracture. Desperate now. "You are making a mistake." Naomi read the message. For a moment, doubt flickered through her mind. "What if it's right?" she whispered. Elias answered softly. "Every predator tells the same story when the trap closes." 5 seconds, Volkov said. The beam from Earth brightened. The alignment was perfect. Earth, moon, trench, fracture, all connected. "Naomi," Volkov said, "it's time." The prompt blinked once more. "Select primary reality." Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. 17 timelines, 17 possibilities, but she understood something now. The lock didn't need perfection, it needed stability. She opened her eyes and made her choice. Her finger pressed the key turns. The moment Naomi confirmed the timeline, the Artemis station erupted in light. The beam from the Mariana Trench surged through the lunar node. A pulse of energy spread outward from the moon across Earth, across space-time itself. The monolith network activated. 33 nodes ignited across the planet. Utah, Romania, Turkey, Australia, deserts, mountains, ocean floors, each monolith flared with blinding white light. The lock engaged. The ancient ring beneath the ice roared as the fracture collapsed inward. Reality folded like closing doors. The entity beyond the barrier screamed through the signal network. Wait! You don't understand. But it was too late. The final tumblers of the lock slid into place. The fracture sealed. The signal vanished. The Antarctic structure went dark for the first time in 65 million years. The lock was complete. The light faded slowly from the lunar horizon. Commander Volkov exhaled. Well, that was something. Her crewmates stared at the monitors. All systems stable. Timeline variance? 0. Volkov smiled. Looks like we're still here. Naomi's monitors went quiet. The anomaly alert stopped. The signal logs fell silent. Outside her window, the night sky looked exactly the same, but the world felt steadier. Elias spoke through the call. It worked. Naomi nodded slowly. Yes. Elias leaned back in his chair. History has stabilized. Naomi looked up at the moon. Then the Mandela effects are over. 6 months later, the world never learned the full truth. Scientists debated the mysterious beam from the Pacific. Governments quietly sealed their reports. The monoliths vanished one by one, leaving only speculation behind. Most people eventually forgot about them. Just another strange chapter in the internet age, but Naomi Calder knew better. In her apartment, the servers still hummed quietly, preserving history, guarding the timeline. Because she understood something now. The lock might be